Gemini, I remember your reading from last month, and based on that, I think you're about a month ahead of many of the other signs. Looking in the recent past, I knew it was fundamental, but it's telling me that your whole world changed as a result. Everything has changed, and actually, despite it not seeming like a good reading, things are beginning to get better for you. You might not be aware of that even in January, but they are. Your overall feeling is one of hanging around. Now, last month was about deception and getting over it. And now that you've realised the level of deception that exists in the world, I think quite rightly you're hanging on and saying, well, let's see the lie of the land before I do too much. And indeed, right now, you are looking at your options, planning maybe something very radical. Planning maybe something radical, even maybe moving to another part of the world. But you're sort of sitting on your hands and saying, well, I'm not too certain yet. I want to find out more. You're not trying to push that. You're quite happy to just observe. But, you're not going to show your hand. In the future, things have been a bit of a struggle for you. I mean, they have for everyone. This level of deception that exists in the world has caused problems for everyone. And you've been dealing with them. You've been quietly plodding on. But you do know an end is in sight. I think a part of all this is, you're getting thoroughly fed up with the world as you know it, and you're walking away. Now, maybe this is a part, if you remember I said you were maybe planning on moving to another part of the world. Maybe that's all it means, or it could be something else. And that leads to the outcome, but what would change the outcome is you feeling that you have a difficult decision to make, and none of the options, or neither option, depending on how many there are, none of them seem to stand out. Maybe this is to do with the move, I don't know. But, it's a very difficult decision. But if you get stymied in taking that decision, then you're not going to move on. And if you go with that, you're throwing the towel in, getting fed up, moving on. Then you end up much more in control of your emotions and understanding the emotions of others, which I think is critical to dealing with the sorts of energies we have right now. So it looks positive, even though it might not feel like it, Gemini. So stick around as I unpack this. Now, the overall energy is one of hanging around. I don't believe this has been imposed upon you. I believe you're choosing to do it. Because, you got burnt by deception. You saw through it. And I think you're partly trying to work it out, but more so just seeing the lie of the land. There's a lot of deception around, and probably more to come. So before moving on, you're just quietly sort of assessing things. And I think once you feel confident that you know what's happening, you'll make a move. But now isn't quite the right time. And I think a good many of us feel like that, for a whole host of different reasons. But something that's been coming out this month is that we cannot comprehend what is happening through the logic of the head, but by using the heart. And so many of us are struggling to come to terms with that. So I think what you're doing is entirely sensible, Gemini. I really do. Now, know you realise that last month was profound, but I don't know how much you realise that your world completely changed. You've stepped into a new paradigm, and it was the realisation of the deception that created this new paradigm that you've stepped into. And with it, it should bring good luck. And you know, I can see luck or better times for almost all signs. Doesn't mean to say that you won't still be tested and there still won't be problems. But there are better times ahead. There really are. Believe me. So that new paradigm started last month. And it'll go on for a while, but there's at least another 7 years of changes like this. I don't know if it's a result of this awareness of these deceptions or that your world's changed, but you are considering some quite radical things. Radical options. It could include moving overseas. You're definitely considering your options. You might even be considering different countries. Now remember, you're hanging around, so I don't think you've actually reached a conclusion. You're not action planning. You're not saying, okay, well, I'm going to do this. You're looking at the different ones and saying, I'm not sure, but I do want to do something ultimately, which of course is why you're hanging around, because you don't feel now is quite the right time to take that decision. Now in the future, probably only talking of February, so if you remember the overall theme is of hanging around, but in the future you're going to feel that you've nearly got there, an end is in sight, that it's time to take a decision, as it were. Very nearly got to where you want to be, and you know that things have been a struggle for you. You're aware of that, but you've kept persisting because you know there's an end in sight, and here it's coming in the future. So well done for your perseverance and persistence. Before we get to that point, remember that's next month, you're going to get thoroughly fed up with something. Throw the towel in and go off on your own. Go off in a new direction. You're going to be absolutely fed up with something and say, no, it doesn't matter how difficult the alternatives are, I'm going to go with the alternative. Now, putting it into the context of maybe you planning a move overseas, and as I say, I think you're torn between different countries. This could be simply you saying, well, I've got to move, that's for sure. I've decided I want no more to do with where I am. The difficulty is I can't decide on where I should go. So that's the sort of energy that we're talking about here. Very interesting. And that leads to the outcome, and I think the outcome is a good outcome. Now, what would change the outcome, I think, is you seeing this, these options that you've got as being a decision that you have to rationally make. And I think you can't, going back to the idea that you might be considering different countries, I don't think you feel that you can rationally make this decision, because it's not a decision based on rational, it's a decision based on the heart. But as long as you see it as a rational decision, you'll find it impossible to make. And, even if you jump at one, through rationality. Well, no, scrap that. No, getting stymied because of you're trying to take a rational decision will mess up what I see as a very good outcome. So we need to tell you what the outcome is now, don't we? As I say, the outcome is a good outcome, and the outcome is you stepping into your power as the King of Cups, the King of Love. So stepping into the power of love, which is very much what the universe, God, Allah, whatever you see as being behind all this, is encouraging us to do. And it's understanding your own motivation and the motivation of others, being forgiving of maybe those who've deceived you, because you can see what their motivation is, even though you don't agree with it. But understanding your own motivation is so important, because remember, I said that this decision that you need to make needs to be done with the heart and not the head. Well, of course, the King of Cups is ideally suited to take decisions of the heart. So you're going to allow the heart to lead you in future. And this is the paradigm in which you've now stepped. So this is a beautiful reading. It really is. Even though January, and maybe even after January, will still feel like a struggle to you. Last month's reading was probably a traumatic reading, a traumatic month. You began to understand the deception that's all around us. And I think it had a profound effect on you. But you know, most people are beginning to understand that this month, January. And it's leading them to a new paradigm. Your new paradigm has already started. Your new world has already opened up. I'm not certain you've completely realised it yet. But with that will come blessings. With that will come better luck. That isn't to say that there aren't many more changes to come over the next 7 years. But you appear to be ahead of many people. And I think you're aware of these changes and you're waiting to see the lie of the land before you decide on what you want to do, and that's very sensible. You see, you've been planning radical change. It could be moving overseas, and it's sort of like you're planning on considering different countries. But you're not sort of action planning. You're not saying, well, I must do that and then that, you know. You're just considering maybe different countries. And it is quite radical, and you know it's quite radical, but you know, you don't quite know what to do. But what I think happens this month is you decide to throw in the towel of what you have been doing. Now, if we are talking of countries, that would involve you turning round and saying, well, okay, I'm not certain which country I want to go to. But what I do know is that I must move. I must create change. So I think that's fairly fundamental. And from that, you step into the power of love, as it were. You begin to realise not only your own motivation, but those of others. And from there you can understand and forgive those who've maybe deceived you. It doesn't mean to say you'll forget, but you know, you can understand. But what's more important, you can take decisions based on the heart and not the head. You see, there is the potential for you to get completely stymied by trying to rationalise these decisions. And this new world, this new paradigm that's opened up, is one where we will be led by the heart and not the head. So don't get confused by slipping back to that old paradigm. And what I can tell you is that after January, you begin to see that there is an ending coming. You can look back at your turmoils and the problems you've had and the struggles, but you do slowly begin to realise that, yeah, there is light at the end of the tunnel.